Lesson 63. Product of square root rules and repeating decimals. When we have a square root times another square root, we can write it like this. A product inside of the same square root. And it also goes backward. If I have a product inside of the square root, I can write it in two different square roots. So let's look at this first example. It says simplify the square root of 50. We know it's not a perfect square because you have memorized all the perfect squares. So we think about which two numbers I can multiply to get 50. If I multiply the square root of 2 times the square root of 25, that equals 50. Now, the square root of 25 is a perfect square. The square root of 25 is 5. And the square root of 2 is not, so I'll just put it like that. And that is our answer. We could also factorize 50 if we're not sure about the factors. And we can get half, which is 25. And then here, I realize that 25 is a perfect square, and that's the number I use. Now, if we factor, and let's say we start with 5, so that's 10. Neither 5 or 10 are perfect squares, so I have to keep going. So we have another 5, which is 2, and a 2, which is 1. Well, then here, I see that I have two numbers that are the same multiplying, which is going to be a perfect square. So that's 25. And then I see the numbers again that I need. Notice that I have to choose very carefully what are the numbers, because if I were to choose the square root of 10 times the square root of 5, they cannot be simplified because the square root of 10 is not a perfect square and square root of 5 is not a perfect square. So this one doesn't work. You have to look for the one that includes a perfect square like here. Let's look at this other example, 200. Again, 200, it's an easy one because we have 100 and we know that the square root of 100 is 10. And the square root of 2 we don't know, so we just put the square root of 2. But again, if you're not sure about it, you just factorize. And if you don't know that 100 is a perfect square, then you just keep going. Half is 50, half is 25, 5 is 5, and 5 is 1. And then we do groups of 2 to get perfect squares. So it would be, if we do it this way, it would be the square root of 4, the square root of 25, and the square root of 2, using these three groups. Square root of 4 is 2, square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 2, we leave it like that, and that would be 10 square root of 2. Notice how easy? Either way is fine. If you know your perfect squares, then it's easier just to do it like that. In the third example, we have 147, and 147 is not a very common number. It's not a number that we use very often, so it would be maybe hard to see what are the factors. But once I have it here to factorize, I see that it's divisible by 7. So I divide 14 divided by 7 is 2, and 7 divided by 7 is 1. Then I do another 7, which is 3, and 3, which is 1. Here again, I have my perfect square, so I'm going to say that that equals the square root of 49 times the square root of 3. And again, the square root of 49 is 7, and the square root of 3, we don't change it, we leave it like that. Then we have 108. Again, if I get half of it, it's 54. If I get another half, it's 27. If I get 3, it's 9. If I get 3, it's 3. And if I get 3, it's 1. And again, I do perfect squares. That's 4, that's 9, and 3. So that's the square root of 4, square root of 9, and square root of 3. When I reduce that, I get 2 times 3 times the square root of 3, which is 6 square root of 3. And that's it. Very, very simple. Now in this lesson, they also want you to memorize the repeating decimals. So remember that 1/3 is, if you divide 1 divided by 3, the answer is 0.333 repeating. So the way we're going to write that is 0.3 with a little line on the top, which it means that it is repeating. 2/3 is 0.666 repeating. So we're going to write 0.6 with a little line on top. 1/9, if we divide 1 divided by 9, is 0.1 repeating. So again, we will put the 1 and then a little line on top. And finally, 1/6 is 0.16 repeating. Now you have to memorize this, so make sure you do. And that's it. That is our lesson. Very simple. Go do some practice, and I'll see you in the next lesson.